What does make it? Making it means, I suppose it means you're at a level where you are happy with what you are doing, and you're being acknowledged by your peers, and hopefully you have a roof over your head and then a plate of McNuggets in front of you, or something better.
Yeah.
Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome to the show, and thanks for tuning in. I want to let you know how much I appreciate you joining us on our show every week. If you missed our last interview, you can hear it and all of our episodes at entertalkradio.com/makingit, or download our app and take us with you. You can also hear us on Spotify and iTunes as a podcast. So often I get asked questions about the creative process. So I created this show to focus on what it takes to have a lasting career in the ever-changing landscape of the entertainment business. You're really in for a treat, as I've invited my friends, some of the best and brightest in music and art, to share their stories on how they have influenced the music and comedy that have shaped our lives. I guarantee you're going to love it. So let's get started. My guest today is Bruce Vilanch. Bruce Gerald Vilanch is an American comedy writer, songwriter, and actor. He is a 6-time Emmy Award winner. Vilanch is best known to the public for his 4-year stint as a celebrity participant on Hollywood Squares, while also working behind the scenes as the head writer for the show. In 2000, he performed off-Broadway in a self-penned one-man show, Bruce Vilanch, Almost Famous. Since 2000, Vilanch has been the head writer for the Oscars, after being an Oscar program co-writer for the previous 10 years. He's also a featured writer for the Tonys, Grammys, and Emmys. Vilanch was the subject of the documentary Get Bruce. This film includes interviews with Bette Midler, Robin Williams, Billy Crystal, and Whoopi Goldberg. Bruce's mother, whom he credits with developing his sense of humor, also appeared in the documentary. Please welcome my guest today, Bruce Vilanch. Hey, Bruce, welcome.
It's exciting. It sounded like a little Wikipedia-ish, which means you would get to the part where it says I'm a vegan, which is hysterical because I'm not.
You're right. I didn't think you were.
No, but I mean, it has all other kinds of, and people can punk your Wikipedia page and put in stuff that nobody checks. So I'm always periodically I go there to find out what I've done that I didn't realize.
Right. Also your IMDb page is remarkably short, which I found fascinating. And it basically says Bruce Vilanch was born November 23rd, 1948 in New York City, New York. He's a writer and actor known for You Don't Mess with the Zohan, the 64th Annual Academy Awards, and Comic
cool.
Release
Yeah.
5. That's your complete credits.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought I had this part. Well,
IMDb.
It's funny because years ago I had an agent at the William Morris office who said, you can lose the last 3 pages of your credits because it makes you too old.
Oh,
You don't want to. You want to tell people that you're old enough to have done all of that stuff, but you were around back then.
right.
So, I thought, okay, well, I guess it's the ultimate show business compliment of some sort.
I suppose
Anyway.
so. It is. So Bruce, it appears that your career has gone so well that you actually don't need to stay current on your credits anymore. Do you pay attention besides, checking Wiki for laughs to see, what people are making up about you? Or do you find it important to keep putting all of your new projects up on your website?
Actually, I don't put them up. I mean, I think when other things get registered, I mean, it's anything that goes through any guild crediting procedures, stuff like that. That's where they comb those lists of things, and they whoever is in charge of those websites puts the stuff up. I mean, I never. Occasionally, I'll throw something in. I mean, there was a movie that I was in. I made a picture with Marcello Mastroianni in 1972. Called "Excuse Me, My Name Is Rocco Papaleo." It has the distinction of being the only Marcello Mastroianni movie to flop in Italy, and he was a huge Italian star and a big star around the world. Anyway, so and I want to be credited with that.
Of course,
it's such a classy flop that I thought I needed to be credited with that. So I forget. I think I actually did at IMDb. I submitted it, and they added it. Which made me laugh. Otherwise, no, I never. I mean, I look at those things occasionally just to see if the contact information is correct.
Right.
I've switched agents without realizing it because that's what happens.
Is that how people?
Somebody else can submit stuff for you, and they never asked me anything. They didn't we have a submit are you a vegan? I never got a letter from Wikipedia saying, please discuss your dietary status with us.
Right. Yeah, they just put it up.
I figured that's what Julian Assange is doing in that Ecuadorian embassy. He's looking over everybody's wiki entry and deciding what's real and what isn't.
I would hope he's using his time well. Why not that?
I know. Well, he found his hair color, so that's good.
So let's talk about the opening song that we kicked the show off with, "Sex Over the Phone." I just discovered that yesterday. I had no idea.
That was what it was. I couldn't really hear it, but that's a Village People song.
It sure is.
It sure is, and it actually went to #1 on BBC Radio 1, and then it was banned by BBC Radio 1 because it was found to be encouraging people to have sex over the phone. Like, people need encouragement to do that. Like, it isn't a concept that they light upon themselves with no help from any of us. It started because I wrote the first draft of a movie called Can't Stop the Music, which was the Village People movie.
Right.
And it's a long story, but there was a producer named Alan Carr who did a lot of extravagant things, and he decided that the Village People would be the creation of the Village People would be a terrific story. And so I wrote a first draft script, and then after he kept auditioning, he kept having me rewrite it for different actresses to play the woman who put the group together, which of course never really happened. And after the third rewrite for free, I said, you owe me more money now. And then he said, okay, you're off the picture. And my collaborator on the movie wound up writing all the other drafts, and of course it got made. But and it was a gigantic, a legendary bomb. And but the good news was, for me, I got friendly with Jacques Morali, who was the guy who actually did create the Village People. He was a French composer who came over to New York and was dazzled by the whole gay village scene, and put this act together and wrote all their big hits that YMCA and Go West and all that, Macho Man.
Right.
And but we got friendly in the course of doing the movie, and Jacques had written for a show in Paris a club called the Crazy Horse, and it was a big deal Paris nightclub. It was one of those things you went to, like the Lido and the Folies Bergère, and it was topless girls. And the gimmick in the Crazy Horse show was all of the girls who came on stage sang topless, but they were not singing, they were lip syncing. And famous singers were recording original material that the girls were singing. And he said he had an idea for a song for Eartha Kitt. So it was called "Where Is My Man?"
Right.
And So he said, right, I think you are a lyricist, chérie, he said. And so I sat down and wrote this lyric to the melody he had come up with. And I had to call Eartha and audition the thing. So I sang it like Eartha. I said, where is my baby? I don't want to be alone. Where is my man? And Eartha listened and she said, you do a very good impression of me. If I hear you're doing it for a living, I will kill you. So she recorded the song, and a spectacular, statuesque blonde woman came out and sang, lip sync to the song, and Jacques went and got the Eartha's version played on French radio, and it took off. It became a disco hit all over the world.
That was the early 80s, wasn't it?
The what?
That was around the early 90s. It was that song came out, right?
Probably, yeah. I would think it was, yeah, early 90s, late 80s, something like that, something around there. Because the movie we met. Well, the movie was 79, 80, and then it was a few years after that, so it might have been a little bit earlier, like 85.
Okay.
In any event, now I was a writer of disco songs with Jacques Morali, and the next project was the new Village People album.
Oh, that's how it led to
that. At that point, the Village People they'd crested. The movie here had done them irreparable damage, and they'd gone from being the hottest thing to being the squarest thing. But in the rest of the world, they were still a terrific novelty act, and they were selling records. So I went to Paris and sat with him, and we recorded an album with them, and it was called "Sex Over the Phone." That was the lead single. We had a whole bunch of songs that, of course, I can't remember now, but "Sex Over the Phone" was the one that kind of took off, and it was a huge hit in England, and then was immediately banned by the BBC and became a cause célèbre. So. In those days, they had all the radio was in England was run by the state, by the BBC, and by like public radio kind of things. But there were commercial stations that operated from ships offshore, and the biggest one was Radio Caroline, which was actually broadcast from a ship that was anchored just past the 3-mile limit. So it was in international waters, and the government couldn't get at it. And they would run all the stuff that the BBC wouldn't play. And it was a huge underground station, like a progressive rock station. And they kept playing Sex Over the Phone and all these Village People songs. And so it has a tiny spot in the niche of British musical history.
But but you've also, I mean, what surprised me most when I rediscovered that song was that you have really influenced pop culture in so many more genres and in so many more ways than I realized. Not just as a writer and as an actor, but that you have really done things in the music industry as well. It's pretty wonderful.
Wow. It's great, but it doesn't get me laid. But it's great.
Well, then there's something wrong, because that's why we all got in bands to begin with.
Because the show business model isn't working. Either that or it's me. It's personal hygiene. Who knows?
I actually I can't imagine you not, being able to get laid whenever you want to. You're such a great guy.
I know, but it's any excuse for a cheap joke. It got me out of Jersey.
Right.
I mean,
right. Well, hey,
hello,
so
Jersey. I know they're all listening.
Let's go back to your childhood. I know that you were adopted into a family that turned out to be pretty perfect for you. Can you talk about your mom and dad? And
I was born in New York, and at 4 days I was taken to Paterson, New Jersey, with the first of many insults, because now nobody will admit to being from Paterson anymore. The only things people remember Paterson for are Hurricane Carter, and played by Denzel. And my high school principal, Jolton Joe Clark, with a baseball bat, played by Morgan Freeman, in a picture called Lean on Me. And that was my high school, East Side in Paterson. And while there are like tons of legendary, distinguished alumni, nobody wants to claim the place. I mean, it's a sad story, but sometimes I wax nostalgic for it. But I grew up there, and my father was a doctor, and my mother was a showgirl who never really got into the big shows because she got married when she was young and wound up doing all of this charity work as a dancer. And so I think that probably oozed down to me. I wound up doing all this free charity work because I saw the example that she set. But also they loved the theater. My father loved Broadway. He loved musicals. He invested in them. He made a little bit of money on them. And so I grew up going into musicals, since over Thanksgiving, people were saying, well, we want to have a traditional Thanksgiving. And I would say, a traditional Thanksgiving in my family was we drove into the city to see a matinee because they always had Thanksgiving matinees then. And then we went down to the village to my father's favorite restaurant, the steak joint, and avoided turkey. So it was an extremely chic way to spend Thanksgiving. We were not sitting around the table with a lot of people arguing and farting. We were really in the thick of culture. And that was what my life was like. They were very into all of those things, and I was immediately struck by show business. And I like to make faces in the mirror, so they encouraged me to do that. They encouraged me to do that professionally. So I was a child actor. I was never a child star, or we'd be having this conversation in rehab. Yeah,
that actually worked out to your advantage.
Yeah, it did. Well, they were very grounded. They also wanted me to do something that would provide a livelihood. So they encouraged writing, of all things, because it was clear I wasn't going to be a doctor, and it was clear I wasn't going to be a trial lawyer, which they thought would be a good way for me to act. They take me to see Orson Welles in movies like Compulsion, and I got to watch Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird. I got to watch people making big courtroom scenes, Lionel Barrymore, Spencer Tracy, and none of it rubbed off. I said, why would I want to do that in a courtroom? Who cares? I want to do it on a stage. So that was what I pursued, and it was always writing and acting back and forth between the two from then on.
And your degree that you got from Ohio State was in theater and journalism, right?
That is true. It was a 5-year thing, arts education. Totally true. To be true, it was the stay out of Vietnam degree, because when you were in college in those days, if you had a student deferment and you graduated or left, you were immediately went from 2S to 2A, and you were drafted and sent over. And we were all trying to avoid that because we were all against the war and nobody wanted to go fight it. So, the people who did, a lot of the people who went didn't want to go. They had no choice. Obviously there were some people, like Oliver Stone, who wanted to be a part of it, but that was not my crowd. That was not the theater crowd.
No, I remember because I was on the tail end of the draft.
So I was born in the lottery. Did you have a lottery number and all that?
Yeah, I had a lottery number. It was the last year of the draft. Yeah, when I was in high school. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I had it, and I was, I actually got drafted, so I got to go down and check the box, so I didn't have to go. But I still had the student deferment. And the idea is, as long as you can hold on to your student deferment, you should hold on to it. Right. And so I did, as many of us did. It was interesting to me a few years ago now that I think about this, when Bush and Quayle and Clinton were all running for president. Nobody they kind of cordially agreed not to mention each other's service records because they didn't have any. They had all found ways to avoid going.
Right.
Because they were of their generation, which is to say, my generation, where everybody found a way not to go. And the people who went were much more working class guys than we were. Anyway, this has nothing to do with the music business or show business or anything else. It'll only get me into trouble. So, hey.
This show is about life, and it's about the creative process and art and, comedy and music, but it's also about just the journey, that we're on. So I love hearing you share that part of your story. I think it's important. It's part of what made you who you are.
I always thought, it is, especially now that everybody, all of us are arcing into our dotage and we're reminiscing about these things. And it's like it's too old to matter now. I remember every time I look at Prince Charles, I think he's my age. And I think
kind of incredible.
he was untouched by anything that happened to our generation.
Right.
Because
true.
he was raised to be King of England.
Right.
And so, like, the Beatles didn't hit him. Vietnam didn't hit him. Drugs didn't hit him. All of those things that hit every one of us never hit him because he was in this bubble. And I don't know. I find that fascinating too. So he winds up now being an architecture critic and a climate change activist, which is not a bad thing.
So,
but he's had a rocky road.
That's true. I want to talk about your writing career because it's opened so many doors for you. And I know that you work for the Chicago Tribune and as the entertainment writer, and you had this goal to spend as much time as you could with celebrities. And I'm wondering, why was that important to you? Is that just, or did you have a plan? I guess that's my question. Did you have a plan?
It wasn't my goal to do that. I don't know if that's written somewhere.
It is. So I guess it's incorrectly written.
Is it quoted by me from me? I must have been joking.
No, it's not a quote by you. It's I don't remember where I read it, just from Googling you. It basically said, as an entertainment writer, he began spending time with as many celebrities as would let him. So, well,
that's true because that was my job. I was a feature writer for the Chicago Tribune, and I was doing profiles of we used to call them visiting firemen, of celebrities, of people who were coming through and plugging their shows. So the more the merrier, because that was how we filled the pages. But I mean, it's also fascinating. I mean, I think celebrity is a never-ending source of amusement and horror, and so being in the presence of them and then becoming one myself 20 years later when I went on Hollywood Squares. Was getting to enjoy it from both sides, just like Joni Mitchell.
Is both sides now pitching high for those who go listen to the song,
right?
But is that the first time you actually felt like a celebrity? Because I already, maybe just because we have mutual friends and we're in the same business, but I already viewed you as somebody who was well known. But
I was well known. I think I was well known in the industry. I had been actually on television. Before that, in the late 70s, on the Midnight Special, which was a show NBC ran at 1:00 in the morning on Fridays. It ran from 1 to 2:30. It followed the Tonight Show, which in those days ran from 11:30 to 1. And it was rock and roll. It was pop music live. I mean, doing live performances on a soundstage at NBC. And what happened was video came in. With the advent of cable, video came in, and everybody did videos. Nobody wanted to come to Burbank and do another live performance for a show that was on at 1:00 in the morning. They said, show my video. And there was a competing show called Don Kirshner's Rock Concert that did just show videos pretty much. And we, Midnight Special, the whole brand was in concert. So as there were fewer acts that would do it, they had to find something to fill that time. And they came up with, Dick Ebersol, who was the producer, came up with an idea of having like a dorm room conversation among off-the-wall semi-celebrities. So it was kind of like Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher, or actually, what Bill Maher does now, but it was much less formal. And I was a guest on the first show, and David Steinberg, the comedian, was the host. And after the first show, he quit. And I came back for the second show, and Dick Ebersol said, "You're the host." So I was the host, and these segments would be peppered throughout the Midnight Special. And for a couple of years, until the Midnight Special finally expired, because it was, and the network didn't want them showing videos. I was on television, so there was a strata of people who were up at 2:00 in the morning on a Friday who recognized me on the street in the supermarkets. But so I had a certain kind of weird, stone celebrity. It was right. So when I got known through that and through a bunch of other things, but Hollywood Squares, where you're on prime time more or less 5 nights a week for 6 years was that's a different kind of thing.
And
that's
were you
like you're really in their face. And
was that around the? Sorry for interrupting.
They still know me from it, but it's not. It's not. I used to do when Barry Manilow got very famous, and he had that have tailors come to the house to make him clothing because he couldn't go shopping because he was mobbed everywhere he went,
right.
and would go out in disguises and stuff. It's not that kind of celebrity. It's just the kind where they recognize him and they go, "Oh, look, that guy! Oh, it's that guy!"
Right. Well, you also have a very recognizable face.
You've gotten to another level.
Yeah. Was that job kind of round the clock for you? Because not only were you on camera, but you were also the head writer for the show. Did you go in the morning and start?
It was the way we did the show was to shoot it on the weekends. We would shoot a week's worth in a day. So we would do 2 weekends a month, which was 4 weeks of programming, and we did 36 weeks a year. So technology had come in to the point where we could do a lot of it online, a lot of the writing and the editing, and parsing of material and whatnot. We didn't have to go into an office, and we didn't have to sit around a table. I mean, it was a perfect vehicle for the internet because we were just writing jokes. I mean, we didn't have to write anything more than just a line for this and a line for that. So there was a team that wrote questions and a team that wrote jokes.
Do you prefer?
And then on the weekends we go do the show.
Right. Which was it as fun as it appeared to be?
Oh yeah, it was fabulous.
It was a great group of people.
It was wonderful to show up in the morning, and everybody would be there, kind of pounding down the coffee,
sure,
and going over the material. I mean, we had to have, but they wanted the show to be more comedy than anything else, and so we gave everybody bluff joke answers. We couldn't give them the real answer because the contestants had to know that these guys didn't know the real answers. Otherwise, they would agree with them every time,
right?
And there'd be no game. So we had to give them something to say before they gave them the real or the fake answer, whatever they were going to do,
right?
And so it was a volume business. There was a lot of stuff, but in the course of the day, everybody was having fun. When we were up there, the idea was it was a party between the 9 people who were up there, and Whoopi was the ringmaster, and she made it fun.
What's your creative process like when you're writing for not just a show like that, but when you're writing for Bette Midler or Diana Ross or even the Academy Awards? Are you disciplined? Do you sit down and from 10 in the morning till noon you write jokes or stories or research, or is it always different?
Yeah, I do. I mean, all of those things, the writing is tied to a specific function. If Bette is going on tour, we're putting together a show that's based on the new material musically that she's doing generally. I mean, people go on tour when they have an album to sell, although that's the old model. Now they want to sell the show tickets because you make more money that way. They don't even necessarily have a new album. Bette has always gone out when she's had a new record. So it's about building the show around the new musical stuff. And of course, when you are an established star, you're building the show around the songs you have to do. With Bette, there are always like 5 things she has to do: The Rose and Wind Beneath My Wings and From a Distance and Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy and Do You Want to Dance? Right. Has to do them in every show, so you have to figure out a way to put those in, and maybe Friends, which was her theme from the beginning.
Right.
But and she has various characters who she plays. We had the mermaid, and we had the bag lady, and we had different things. So all of that writing is in and out of songs and all that. So that's how the creative process starts. You have to figure out how you're going to make it work. What is relevant about this particular piece of material, and how you're going to do it. It's the same thing on the Oscar show. Somebody's going to come out and present an award for art direction. So you have a task in front of you, which is to make this person sparkle while talking about art direction. Or sound effects editing, or whatever that is. That used to lead to banter, which is an expression I hate, which is when two people who are unrelated come out and pretend to have a conversation in front of the microphone, and it almost never works unless they're funny intrinsically and and have a character to play or something like that.
Regardless of what you write for them, it's still hard to get it to work if the chemistry's not there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a difficult thing.
One of the things that I think that I really appreciate about you is I know that you're also not afraid to throw everything out to go with the moment of what's actually happening in front of you. The perfect example is when the Oscars that year with the one-arm push-ups.
Yeah.
And you just went with it.
It was Billy Crystal hosting, and it was like his decision. He said, "Well, after Jack did that, Jack Palance, we said, well, we've got to keep talking about this." And so, in order to make room for those jokes, we had to get rid of other stuff. But a lot of people don't remember that Jack Palance won that Oscar for City Slickers, which was Billy's movie.
Right.
And Billy had sort of put him in the movie, and he was somebody who Billy always admired. And so that gave Billy license to continue making that joke about him. And so it was his idea. But yeah, sure, we just trashed. We got rid of a lot of stuff and wrote on the fly. And we won an Emmy for that show just for writing on the fly. And it kind of became the tradition of those award shows where there's writers backstage waiting for the host, waiting for something to happen that the host can comment on. And it works really, really well when it works. Part of the kerfluffle right now with the Oscars finding a host is that the network and the Academy strongly believe that it helps the show to have a host because the host can play off of the live moments that happen. And if you have a no-host situation, that's not going to happen because
you miss
you're
the
not going to, unless you get very lucky and have somebody at the right moment who is willing to trash what we're going to do in order to make a joke about what happened. But that becomes a negotiation, and it's not going to work. So they're eager to have somebody who will, for better or worse, guide you through the evening. Obviously, not for worse, or they would have somebody. But
I love the fearlessness of that. The willingness and the openness to being, just to throwing out what you have. You're not attached to it because you know that there's something greater that could happen. I mean, it like you said, it created a new paradigm or a new protocol for how to write for award shows, which is a lot more fun to watch as an audience member.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and mostly it's people who are comedians, who are stand-ups, who are used to doing stuff themselves, who are willing to do that. But occasionally you get somebody like Hugh Jackman who wants to do that, who's, that's not part of his DNA. And I did a couple of Tony shows that he hosted, and it worked every time. I mean, the audience was delighted that he would come out and make some remark about something that had gone on stage before.
Mm-hmm. So,
but then he's Hugh Jackman. I mean, he's Wolverine who can also play Peter Allen, be a gay song and dance man.
Right.
I mean, he's a multifaceted individual.
Yeah, I was blown away when I saw the level of his singing and dancing. Because I knew him as just a stud, a guy that was this great actor.
Well, most people did, but the truth is he got started in musicals. Yeah, I mean, he did a bunch of musicals in Australia. He did Sunset Boulevard and Beauty and the Beast, and then he went to London, and his big break was doing Oklahoma in London in a revival, and he got a movie out of that, and he became very hot. Because they realized he could do all these things. He put all of that on the shelf to establish his movie cred. And then after he had done all that, he said, now I want to do a musical. And his people were kind of stunned. He said, what, Wolverine? You want to sing and dance? And not just a musical, but a musical about Peter Allen, who, of course, is known in this country principally as one of Liza Minnelli's husbands and a bisexual guy who used to use that as part of his act, and they didn't know that Hugh grew up in Australia idolizing Peter Allen because Peter was a gigantic star in Australia.
Right. Yeah.
Because he had gone off, and in the Australians' eyes, he had conquered the world. So it was one of those happy things that just sort of happened. And now, he does musicals about P.T. Barnum. And now he's going to go off and do his act, his nightclub act. He's going to tour, play arenas.
Are you going to write for that?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. He did
I hope
done
so.
a few before, so I never know.
Well, you're not afraid to say no to people. Like I read that Barbra Streisand reached out to you at one point to write, and her fee wasn't appropriate for your talent. So you passed.
That is correct. I passed, and I told the story in the movie Get Bruce, which is a documentary about me. We're doing a sequel called Had Bruce, to have a much larger cast. And I'd like to point out it was produced by Harvey Weinstein, who never laid a hand on me.
His loss.
Yeah, me too. Why not me?
Are you really doing? Is there really a second documentary?
Sorry?
You're serious though about doing a second follow-up documentary?
No.
Okay. Oh, that would be great.
It's just another joke that got me out of Jersey.
Got it. I love the first one.
I told the Barber story in the movie, and she got very upset. And it took her a while to finally admit that it was the truth. I hadn't made it up, and so now I think we're okay. But it was she didn't want to pay me enough, she lowballed me. And
right.
She had just had a big auction of her furniture, and she said, "What do you want me to do?" And I said, "Sell a lamp." And
right.
Well, it's not like I was asking for the moon, but I've since written for her for free for a bunch of charities. We are politically aligned,
right?
So she does fundraisers for Democrats, and I come in and do them for free because I'm a Democrat.
Well, and it's important to you. I mean, that's one thing. You show up for a lot of important causes, all around the country and the world.
Well,
and
I think I got that from my parents, who were very philanthropic, but showed up. I mean, my father was an optometrist, and on the weekends he would go up to homes for the aged and do free eye exams for people who couldn't afford to,
wow,
or who were homebound in a home. And that was, I saw that. I went with him sometimes, and so it was. I learned by example. I mean, these were people who stepped up and took care of other people.
Right, did the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you sing when you were a kid too, or was it mostly acting, writing, and some dancing? Typical theater.
I sang. I'm an eccentric dancer. Which means, I learn the steps, but it's nothing, it's nothing that I do. It's not like I'm not like Tony Basil, who gets up and does the bar every morning, and then at night she's out in some salsa club in Boyle Heights. This is not me.
Well, but
I'm not that kind of a dancer.
But Dick Van Dyke's the same way. When I worked with Dick in the recording studio, I asked him about his dance background, and he said he had never taken a dance class in his life. The first time that he danced was Mary Poppins. Even though he was a comedic, physical comedy actor with his pratfalls and things, but that was the first time he had worked learning dance steps. So I would put you.
Exactly true. That's not exactly true, because he starred on Broadway on Bye Bye Birdie in 1959 with Cheetah Rivera, and they did dancing together.
Okay.
And it was someone like Gower Champion, I think, who actually staged it. So I think Gower Champion did stage it, as a matter of fact. So he'd been around. He'd done a couple of twirls.
Well, that makes more sense. Well, let's talk about Broadway for you.
He may have forgotten with the sequencing, right? Because I also have a feeling that on a sound stage with 30 guys dressed as chimney sweeps doing a routine, it feels much more like, dancing than on Broadway with Cheetah, but doing partnering.
That
So
makes sense.
to be fair, because I love him and we know each other.
Yeah.
That may be what he's referring to, like that kind of dancing where you're at the head of a crowd.
That makes sense. Right. You did your off-Broadway one-man show, Bruce Vilanch, Almost Famous, and it didn't quite fit like a standard Broadway show. Because didn't you open up the second half to Q&A?
Yeah, I did. I did.
That's a great concept.
It was off-Broadway, and it was about 20 years ago now. But I did because, it's like it worked for Carol Burnett. How bad can it be? I mean, I'm answering your question. So, and after a while, I mean, we had people, we had cards on the tables because it was a nightclub setting, and they during intermission could fill out these cards and put them back, and most of them tend to ask you the same thing, and so you kind of have prepared responses after a while. I mean, you never prepared them, but by doing them enough times, you know what you're saying. But there would always be some wonderful question that would just be like off the wall that they would throw at me, which I loved. That was fun, and it made the show different.
Yeah, I mean, you seem always very comfortable with spontaneity, that you thrive on that.
Yeah. Except, I mean, I did that show was scripted, but it's not like Dame Edna, who works with the audience. The show is working with the audience. There are a lot of other people. I mean, Paula Poundstone does that, so she's a genius. She does it brilliantly with the audience, and it wasn't that kind of a show. It was one little segment.
And let me ask you about Hairspray, Bruce. When did you find that the stage, the national tour that you did for 2 years, was that a burnout, or did you prefer to be on Broadway when you did it sitting in the same theater, or were they both just interesting?
I loved the whole thing. I mean, it was a very high end tour. I mean, we did 14 cities in a year. Oh, so it was a minimum of 2 weeks, and most of them were 3 weeks and some sit downs. Right. Chicago for a couple of months, San Francisco for a couple of months.
Right.
Oh yeah, it was brilliant. And then I loved going into New York. I mean, I just loved being on Broadway, and there's a thing when you're on Broadway. There's a community, and Monday tends to be dark nights, so everybody does benefits on Monday nights. You're never off, right? But it's great. Just the one thing that I learned was that I'm an older bride. Even then, anything I do during the day, I will pay for on stage at night. So the idea was to kind of, lay low. So there wasn't I didn't have a whole lot of living to do in New York because I had to get up there and do things, or in any of these other towns. I mean, I would do things. I'd manage a lunch somewhere or go look at something, but I had to be very careful.
Yeah, that's really what I'm curious about, because it requires a lot of stamina to do a live stage show.
Well, also I was with a lot of, there were two of us, me and Todd Sussman, who played Wilbur, my husband, and we were basically the oldest people in the company, and everybody else in Hairspray is like young, and they're partying, and no matter where you are, I mean, they're in Denver where you can barely breathe, and and they're partying like crazy. Of course, they're all calling out the next day, and we're doing the show.
Right.
I mean, it's like I didn't realize I was as disciplined as I apparently was.
I want to ask you a wardrobe question, because you're known for so many things, but of course your T-shirt collection. Was there a moment where you just decided this is going to be my thing, or how did that happen?
Kind of. I eased into it. It was, first of all, I hated getting dressed. My mother was very particular, and she dressed me up, and I was a porky kid, and so nothing ever felt good. The shirts the neck was too small, and the tie would choke me, and just everything about it. And so any chance I got, I would be in as little clothing as possible, or as loose fitting. And when I got to grow up and go away, I continued dressing like that as much as I possibly could. When I moved to LA, I realized there's a whole culture here of people who can go anywhere wearing a T-shirt. And T-shirts, funny T-shirts sort of began happening at that point in the 70s.
Right. Right.
And first I eased into it. I would wear what was called the layered look. I'd wear a T-shirt under an open shirt. And actually, I used to wear two shirts. I used to wear one shirt on top of another shirt because which I think was really just my attempt to create a muumuu. but I felt like it gave my body a different look, some kind of definition, I guess. And then when I got to LA, I could realize like the T-shirt could have a statement on it, and I'd grown a beard by then. I had grown a beard.
Right.
I was in that Marcello Mastroianni movie. I had to grow a beard, and I had to have a 3-day growth of beard. And I had to have it for 6 weeks, and it's ridiculous. It's so scratchy. It's awful. It kept getting cut back every day. Mm-hmm. So when I finally finished that picture, I said, that's it. I'm done shaving. And for 32 years, I had a beard. And I shaved it for Hairspray to play Edna, because I couldn't talk them into a bearded lady. They said, the audience is making one buy already. They're making a buy that it's two men. Right. Who are playing this couple, and they will accept you as a woman. They won't accept you as a woman with a hormone problem, because that's asking a little too much.
Yeah,
it's a little too John Waters.
Did you feel vulnerable when you finally?
I haven't had the beard since then.
But did you feel like exposed or vulnerable when you had finally shaved after all those years of covering your face? Or was it liberating?
I shaved on Live with Regis and Kelly.
Oh, I forgot
he was still
that.
On at the time. And they brought a barber from Little Italy who cut me, and I was bleeding. And once all that cleared up, I discovered that the part of my face that had been hidden by the beard for 32 years was like baby tush. It was so smooth and so lovely because it had never endured bad weather.
Right.
And I thought, well, this is it. I look younger. Oh, baby. And I live in LA and I look younger. I have found the magic elixir. so I've never grown a beard since. That's it.
Well, you have a beautiful face. It's, it's great that you're sharing it with the world like that.
Yeah. And there's that.
Well, yeah. Most people that I know I guess most people that I know, they move to LA either for a relationship or a job. What was one of those two things part of your initiative for moving to LA and out of Chicago, New York?
It was a job, actually. I mean, I was living in Chicago, writing for the Trib, and writing for Bette, and a lot of other people who I had met through writing for Bette and interviewing them for the Trib. And Bette had a dresser whose brother started the Manhattan Transfer, Jim Hauser. Mm-hmm. And Bette loved them, and she got her manager to manage them, and she brought Ahmet Ertegun down, and he signed him to Atlantic, and we put an act together, and the act was great. And Fred Silverman was running TBS at the time, bought them for a summer television series. And I took a leave of absence from the Trib to come out here and write the TV show.
Right.
And I had an agent already, so I came to LA with an agent and a job, which is more than most people who want to be in show business come to LA with. Yeah. So I kind of was set up for the future if I wanted to be. And when we finished doing the show, I realized that I wanted to be here and I wanted to be doing that. I was kind of done with doing what I'd been doing in Chicago. I was done with, as I said to at the time to my mother, I've done chronicling the achievements of others. I want to have a couple of my own. Mm-hmm. And that was it. That was how it happened. So the shorthand is, I came out here for a job.
Well, and I know Bette Midler has been such a huge part of your path and your career. And we all love her. So let's just talk about that for a brief moment before we get to our closing questions. I know that you met Bette. You went out to review her show, and then I believe she asked you to, write some lines for her. Didn't you encourage her?
That's true. I said, you're really funny. You should talk more on stage. And she said, you got any lines? Because I had done an interview with her after I saw the show in Chicago, and so I began writing local jokes, Chicago jokes, and then those paid off great. And she said, her manager, Aaron Russo, said, "Can you come on the road?" And so I would go out from Chicago on weekends. I was very well positioned because I was in the middle of the country. So I would fly out wherever she was working on the weekends, because at that point she was touring already.
Right.
When I first met her, she had on Broadway and Fiddler on the Roof, and then she played the Baths and all of that. But this was like the big time, and that was how it began, and it hasn't stopped.
Yeah, it's been a great ride, the two of you. Because you've co-written her big shows, and really helped develop some of the characters too. Didn't you? Well, how did the Sophie Tucker character come about?
Well, I had seen Sophie Tucker when I was a kid in Miami at a club that Barbara Walters' father owned. Lou Walters, who owned the Latin Quarter in New York, had a club called the Palm Island Casino, which was on an island in Biscayne Bay and was kind of a front for illegal gambling. And they had all the big headliners, and my parents loved Sophie Tucker, so we went to see her. And she just kind of, her delivery, her style just influenced me. And of course, in my version of Sophie Tucker, she told dirtier jokes than Sophie Tucker actually told, although some of them really are jokes that she did tell. But I mean, there were never any swear words in any of her jokes. It was, but they were pretty obvious what they were. They're double entendre and really funny.
Right.
Anyway, and I was telling Ben about them, and by that point, we were doing theaters, and I think we were on Broadway at the Palace in December of 1973. And I was telling her one night about the Sophie Tucker jokes, and she tried a few of them, and of course they brought the house down. And so we kind of built the character of Soph and her boyfriend Ernie, and it became a staple of her act from then on. And so we can't get away from them. We keep doing them. But a few years ago, I was watching Boardwalk Empire on HBO, and there's they go into a nightclub. It's like 1923 or something like that, and they go into a nightclub, and the marquee says Sophie Tucker, and they go in, and there's an actress playing Sophie Tucker, and she's doing Soph jokes from Bette's act. Just cracked me up. Just cracked me up. As I'm laughing, the phone rings. It's Bette. She says, "Can we get money for this?" We're on two different coasts watching the same show.
Right.
So
with the same question.
I've sent a little note to Terrence Winter, who was writing Boardwalk Empire. I said, thanks for the homage. I said, Sophie Tucker never really did that material. This is our material. And he wrote me back and said, I'm going to have all of our historians fired. Because apparently they were like, they did due diligence on everything because they wanted to create that period. I mean, I had friends who were on the show who said that the wardrobe was actually vintage and it had been in mothballs for 70 years, and it would fall apart when they wore it, and they were always doing repairs. But that was how much they wanted it to look like the real thing.
The authenticity.
And I said, well, they stubbed their toe on this, but it was pretty wonderful. And we never did give any money for it, just as well. Yeah. Maybe a cheese wheel. A Christmas cheese wheel from HBO, something like that.
Bruce, we only have 4 minutes left in our conversation. So
my God, we have to save the world.
Yes, we do. And with the closing questions, and I've got 2 of them, 3 if we have time. The first is, can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career? 3 tips in 4 minutes? Well, number 1 is show up. Yeah.
I mean, just show up. And, by that, I mean, don't just kind of waltz in going nonchalantly, what is this? Show up prepared, know what you're getting into, find out, what the turf is, and just know what to expect, and so you'll be surprised less than you would otherwise.
Good
but
point.
It's what the old line about luck is: opportunity meets preparation.
Right.
Is I mean, it sort of does hold true. I mean, yeah, there's raw luck, but truly, I mean, the luck will put you in the right place at the right time, and then you have to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's how it is. I don't know. If that may be 3 tips right there. I don't know.
That's great. No,
one huge tip.
One huge tip works great. My second question is, what does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally, since that's what the show is called?
What is making what? Sorry.
What does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally?
What does make it? Making it means, I suppose that it means you're at a level where you are happy with what you're doing, and you're being acknowledged by your peers, and hopefully you have a roof over your head and then a plate of McNuggets in front of you, or something better. Yeah.
Also, great answer.
I guess. I mean,
yeah. Well, and also, and you've already talked about on a personal level, just the philanthropy that you're able to do based on your celebrity, your notoriety. You don't waste that. And
that's a bonus. That really is a bonus. I mean, there's all kinds of philanthropy. I mean, when you in the modern age, you can make an unimagined fortune in a minute. You can then give a lot of that away. Right. But if that doesn't happen, you can show up and do service. Right. For people.
And my final question, Bruce, at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
People have asked me that before, and I truly don't know. I suppose you could say get nicer faster, or like sharpen the rough edges sooner, because you're in it for the long haul. I suppose that would be what I would say, but then you'd have to figure out exactly what it was referring to. And I don't even know.
That's true. Well, Bruce, I want to thank you for spending the hour and sharing your stories and your insight. I really appreciate it. And I've always been a fan and really just fascinated by your career. It's been a beautiful one that you've created.
I am too, I have to say. It's a strange thing.
I actually understand that. I get what you mean.
Yeah.
Closing words. We've got about 20 seconds. Anything you want to say?
No, gosh, what can I say?
That's okay.
just make someone happy. In the words of the great Betty Condon and Adolph Green, make someone happy.
Absolutely. If you want to know more about Bruce, go to brucevilanch.com. Or don't go to Wiki or to IMDb.
And you'll find out fascinating things that may or may not be true.
Right. Bruce, thanks for a great hour. And thank you, everybody, for spending the hour with us and listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woolman.